Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Sohn, this is your third hearing. That is highly unusual. One of the reasons that you've had three hearings is that in the first hearing, you went through the entire hearing without disclosing the sweetheart settlement concerning Locast. And the entire purpose of the second hearing was when that came to light. You actively misled Ranking Member Wicker when he asked you in writing about the $32 million settlement. You did not correct the record that it was, in fact, only 2% of that amount, $700,000. You also disclosed at that second hearing that you never notified the White House of this sweetheart deal, even though you signed it literally the day after they announced their intention to nominate you. My question is this: do you think that your failure to disclose the secret deal to this committee and your failure to disclose it to the White House, do you think that reflected poor judgment, yes or no?
No, I answered Senator Wicker's question honestly, okay? And on advice of counsel.
No, you don't think it was poor judgment?
No, I do not, because I was bound by the confidentiality agreement of the settlement.
With respect, no, you were not. The confidentiality agreement, section 6.0, prohibited you from communicating with the media or the press. The last I checked, the United States Senate is not the media or the press. You had an obligation to answer this body accurately, and you did not. I would note the White House is not the media or the press, and you told this committee you didn't inform the president of it either. But let me move on. You don't think it was poor judgment to mislead this committee or to mislead the president who was nominating you. Let me ask you a second question.
Senator, I don't agree that I misled this committee, so I would like to make that
the record is, I believe, abundantly clear, and in fact, I will be sending out my cross-examination from the last hearing, where you repeatedly mislead this committee in that hearing. And in fact, we'll go ahead and actually put this up. I'll note, I asked, did you disclose to the committee that agreement? I did. Did you disclose the agreement to the committee? I did. Hold on a second. Did you disclose to this committee? Yes or no? I did. You disclosed the $700,000 secret settlement? No. So 3 times you say I did, and then, oh, no. You did not. You misled this committee, and you also misled the White House. Let me ask you secondly, the 15 months that your nomination has been pending, you've made not 1, not 2, not 3, you've made 12 separate political contributions to senators running for office. I've been in the Senate 10 years. I have never seen a nominee make contributions to senators while your nomination is pending. I've never seen that once. I had my staff search the records. If we could find anyone in the Trump administration who had done that, my staff was unable to find that. You've been a significant political donor over the years, giving over $32,000. You gave. Do you believe it was poor judgment to give 12 separate political contributions to Democrat senators while your nomination was pending?
Senator, I'm a citizen who just wanted to participate in the Democratic process.
Do you think it's poor judgment to cut checks to senators who are voting on your nomination while it's pending? No other nominee that we can find has ever done that. Do you think it was poor judgment?
Relatively small donations, no, I don't.
It was over $1,000, $32,000 over your life.
Well, that's over my life.
Well, over $1,000 while your nomination was pending. All right.
But not to one person.
No. They were to a dozen senators, to a dozen different senators, including senators who've been critical of your nomination and senators who have not. You managed to cover the waterboard of Democrats running for office. All right, let's turn to another issue, which is you have been an active supporter of a left-wing activist group called Fight for the Future. And I will say the record of Fight for the Future is really quite remarkable because they have blasted members of this committee on both sides of the aisle. Here's a billboard Fight for the Future put up in West Virginia in 2017 attacking Senator Joe Manchin, a Democrat. The billboard essentially accuses Joe Manchin of being corrupt. Ms. Sohn, do you believe Joe Manchin is corrupt?
Absolutely not.
You don't? Okay, well, that's interesting. I will point out, in 2017, Fight for the Future also erected similar billboards accusing Senator Tester and Senator Peters of being corrupt, both of whom are members of this committee. I can't recall a nominee who's actively supported efforts to blast members of this committee to run billboards.
Senator, may I address that, please?
You may.
When you say actively, I give every single organization with whom I work on net neutrality, $100 contributions at the end of the year.
Ms. Sohn, with
Doesn't mean I agree with their
respect,
tactics.
the time is limited, and yes, it does, because after they put up the billboards attacking Manchin, Tester, and Peters as corrupt, afterwards, you sent this tweet. Just made my end-of-year donation to this organization, urging others to do it after they did that. And because the time is limited, I'll note this group also blasted Marsha Blackburn, Dan Sullivan, and Roger Wicker, and astonishingly called for Chairwoman Cantwell to be fired. And after each of those, to be removed from as chairwoman of this committee, after each of those, you supported it. And in fact, I want to turn to the final point, the Roger Wicker one, where this group protested and said, you're buying a senator, and you said you don't support their tactics. I'm going to point out, you tweeted, well done, to this radical group who blasted the former ranking member of this committee and saying that his donors were trying to buy a senator. If they were trying to buy a senator, were you trying to buy senators when you made a dozen contributions?
Senator, I did not know, number one, that was about Senator Wicker. Number two, I was criticizing
it says
Senator
Roger Wicker right there.
Okay, well,
that is literally what you retweeted was his name.
That's fine, but I was actually criticizing the donors and not criticizing the senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as a housekeeping matter, I'd ask unanimous consent to enter into the record 4 different things: a letter from the Log Cabin Republicans opposing Ms. Sohn's nomination, a letter from numerous police groups opposing Ms. Sohn's nomination, and a letter from FCC Commissioner Mike O'Reilly, former commissioner, about the program under Mr. Roop.
Without objection.
Ms. Sohn, I think you have a long and consistent career as a zealous partisan advocate. There is a role for partisan advocates. It just doesn't happen to be on an independent agency charged with overseeing communications in the United States. You also have a consistent pattern of being unable to perceive conflicts of interest, whether it is deceiving this committee and the White House about the sweetheart settlement that you signed the day after your nomination was announced, or whether it is being the only nominee I've seen in a decade to make contributions to senators who are voting on your nomination while your nomination is pending, or whether it is bizarrely supporting an extreme group that blasts multiple senators from both parties. Now, I asked you about Joe Manchin and the group Fight for Our Future, where they ran billboards saying Joe Manchin is corrupt. You said you didn't agree with that. I asked you whether you agreed with them that John Tester is corrupt. You said you didn't agree with that. I asked you whether you agreed with them that Gary Peters is corrupt. You said you didn't agree with that. Well, I didn't get to finish.
Wait,
so
are you going to go to me?
Oh, I am.
Okay.
Because she's attacked you too, but vicariously.
I'm not sure she has. I think an organization
the group
she belongs
that
to.
but not just belongs to, raises money for. So this group also ran the following billboard. It is a picture of Senator Sinema, also a member of this committee. And it's not subtle. In case you want to miss the message they're trying to convey, it's in bright red right at the top. It says, Sinema is corrupt. Do you agree with their sentiment that Senator Sinema is corrupt?
Of course not.
Of course not. Okay, you say of course not. So that billboard went up in 2019. At the end of 2019, what did you do? You sent out a fundraising email for this organization at the end of 2019, so after they had put this billboard up. Did you know about the billboards they put up attacking Manchin and Peters and Tester and Sinema?
I only actually knew the one about Senator Sinema. I didn't know about the other ones either.
Okay, so you knew they'd called Senator Sinema corrupt.
I did.
And after they called Senator Sinema corrupt, you asked people to contribute to them. Is that correct?
I asked people to contribute, not because of all of their
tactics. That's a yes or no
one
question.
Time. Yes, I did.
Okay, so you knew they were calling Senator Sinema corrupt, and you asked them to contribute afterwards. And by the way, the next year, so this is 2019, you know, these tactics, you don't mind. You were aware of them. You've testified you knew about them, at least with regard to Senator Sinema, and you wanted people to support them. You also did it again in 2020, and Chairman Cantwell asked if I was going to ask about her. I'd like to point out this same group sent a letter to Chuck Schumer demanding that Chuck Schumer remove Senator Cantwell as the chairman of the Commerce Committee. Why? Because this committee hadn't confirmed you yet. Now, I think that's a pretty extreme proposition. I gotta say, I've never seen a nominee or a group that the nominee fundraises for demand her own party's chairwoman be fired because you haven't been confirmed yet. Do you understand why this seems one heck of a conflict of interest?
I don't see how it's a conflict of interest, sir.
Does it seem impartial, or does it seem like an extreme partisan willing to burn everything down if either party doesn't do what you want?
Senator, I don't agree with all of Fight for the Future's tactics. However,
except you raise money for them, you know about them, and you raise money for them. You send tweets every year asking people to contribute. When you ask people to contribute, that's called raising money. Let me ask you, does the FCC have an obligation to defend democracy?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, okay. I'd like to look at chart number 15. Chart number 15, you tweeted, and I'm going to read. I agree that scrutiny of big tech is essential, as is scrutiny of big telecom, cable, and media. And trust me, the latter have played their own role in destroying democracy and electing autocrats, like, say, Fox News. Millions of Americans watch Fox News. You believe Fox News. As you said, this is not a retweet. This is you tweeting that Fox News plays a role in destroying democracy. Do you understand why millions of people don't think you're fair and impartial to regulate communications?
Fox News is not regulated by the FCC. And yeah, I have some issues with Fox News. I also have some issues with...
issues. Destroying democracy, that's not little. Let's look at number 16. Senator Sullivan asked you about that. You described Fox News as state-sponsored propaganda. You want to talk about vitriolic rhetoric? Senator Sullivan is right. It's coming from you. These are your words. What about Fox News as state-sponsored? You know, you talk a lot about private actors. Last I checked, Fox News is not part of the government. I want you to explain those two words, state-sponsored. Why? Because state sponsors suggest that at the FCC, you would use government regulatory power to go after them and silence them. What did you mean by state-sponsored?
What I meant by that, and again, remember, I regretted the tone of that, was that they were very, very, very close to the Trump administration. And the two of them were sort of interacting. That's why I called it state-sponsored.
Can I ask you one final question? Yeah. Is MSNBC very, very close to the Biden administration?
I haven't the slightest idea. I don't watch it.
You don't watch MSNBC?
I do not. I don't watch CNN either. I listen to NPR, honestly. I don't.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Biden administration has a pattern of abusing their power, and getting struck down in court over and over again. As you know, I have significant concerns about your record, that you've demonstrated a hostility to conservative speech in particular, to Fox News in particular. And the FCC is a very dangerous place for a regulator to have the authority to silence political views with which you disagree. But we now have a second issue that implicates ethics that I think is deeply serious. You were a board member of the nonprofit Sports Fans Coalition, New York, which operated the low-caste streaming service. You joined the board knowing that they had been sued for copyright infringement. And a federal district court entered summary judgment for the plaintiffs that they had engaged in copyright infringement, that they had broken the law. Ultimately, the case was settled. And I've got to say, Ms. Sohn, the timing of the settlement stinks. Biden administration announced their intent to nominate you on October 26, 2021. The confidential settlement agreement was signed on October 27th, 2021, the day after the intent to nominate. Your actual nomination was made October 28th, the next day, and on that day, a public settlement was filed. The public settlement claimed that the plaintiffs, ABC, NBC, CBS, were going to be paid $32 million, that they had $32 million in damages. That was the public settlement announced on the day of your nomination. What nobody knew at the time is that the secret settlement cut $32 million down to $700,000. That's 2 cents on the dollar. I've litigated a lot of cases. I've settled a lot of cases. I don't recall ever settling a case that my clients had won, that we had a victorious court judgment for 2 cents on the dollar. But you know what? I've never had a case against someone who was about to be the regulator of my industry. On the face of that, that's a sweetheart deal. Did you disclose that sweetheart deal paid to the company on whose board you served, or rather, not paid from the company, that is essentially a gift from the companies the FCC regulate? Did you disclose to this committee that agreement?
I did. So, Senator, let me just explain first. I was not a party. There's no sweetheart deal, okay? Number one, I was never financially liable from the day I stepped on the SFCNY board because there was a case narrowing agreement.
Did you disclose the agreement to this committee?
I did. I said the matter was settled. No.
Okay.
Let me explain.
Hold on a second. The matter was settled doesn't answer. Did you disclose the secret settlement agreement that settled it for $700,000, not the $32 million that was public? Did you disclose it to this committee? Yes or no?
I did. I did when.
You disclosed the $700,000 secret settlement?
No, because I was not allowed. Okay. I was not permitted.
Ms. Sohn, that's actually incorrect. What provision of the agreement says you're not allowed to? All right, I have it in front of me. It's provision 6.0, and here's what it says. I'm going to quote it. Quote, no party will communicate or authorize anyone to contact or communicate with the media or press, orally or in writing or otherwise, concerning the agreement or the order. Last time I checked, the United States Senate is not the press. There's nothing in this agreement that prohibits you from disclosing it to the Senate. You did not disclose it to the Senate. Let me ask you this. Did you disclose it to the White House?
Well, again,
it's a yes or no. Did you disclose the $700,000 secret settlement to the White House?
No,
yes
I did not.
So you did not disclose it to the White House. The entire vetting they did, nobody asked about this?
I was vetted long before. Can I talk about the timing, Senator, if I may?
Sure.
Okay. The settlement, first of all, it's important. I was not a party to this settlement, and I can explain why I signed the settlement agreement if you want to talk about that. Okay?
You knew about it?
I was not a part. No, I was not a party.
Did you know about it?
Did I know about what?
The settlement, the secret settlement agreement, the 2 cents on the dollar, the $31,300,000 that ABC, NBC, and CBS effectively gave away to the company on whose board you sat.
Of course I did.
The day you were nominated.
No. Okay, because I didn't sign it until after I was nominated.
Why does it matter when you signed it?
If you
knew about it and you didn't disclose it to this committee.
Yes, I did. Okay. Let me just step back for a second. Okay. Can we talk about the timing? Because you're wrong on the timing. Okay. There was a term sheet, an enforceable term sheet that I did not sign that lays out.
Which date that I said is wrong?
That was October 12th. Okay. And that's referred to in the settlement agreement. If you look at the very beginning of the settlement agreement.
So you knew about the sweetheart deal 2 weeks earlier. Fine. That doesn't change the timing of.
There's no sweetheart deal. I don't benefit.
2 cents on the dollar is not a sweetheart deal?
I don't benefit, but it's not a sweetheart deal as to me. It's not first of all, it's a settlement, right? So you've got these 4 powerful networks up against a tiny little nonprofit.
And by the way, it's striking. The one network that didn't sign the agreement was Fox News. Fox News also happens to be the network that you've shown incredible animus towards. I got to say, I've been in the Senate 10 years now. I've never seen a nominee for any regulatory board who at the exact moment of her nomination saw the companies that would be regulated by her effectively give a $31 million, $300,000 gift to a company on whose board she sits. That is truly stunning and it's disturbing.
Senator, respectfully, I'd like to explain.
Sure.
The judge, first of all, Locast was not found to have infringed copyright. They were found to only have not qualified for the congressionally mandated nonprofit exemption. Okay, so the judge did not say, Judge Stanton did not say that Locast violated copyright. It did not impose any liability, and it did not impose a $32 million judgment. Okay?
Is this accurate from what was publicly filed? Quote, plaintiffs are awarded statutory damages under the Copyright Act against sports fans in New York in the amount of $32 million. That's what was publicly announced, and then the private secret agreement was it was reduced to $700,000.
Senator?
So, Madam Chair, I want to speak briefly about one of the nominees that just received a tie vote, and that is Gigi Sohn. And I would note I also have very significant concerns about Mr. Bedoya that I expressed at his hearing, and I would reiterate those concerns. But for the purpose of this markup, I want to focus on Ms. Sohn. Look, there are a lot of significant substantive concerns with this nominee. I think former Senator Heidkamp's letter is interesting, and I hope at least some Senate Democrats take it to heart. My principal concern with Ms. Sohn is that she has expressed a significant willingness to use government power against political enemies and to use government power as a tool of censorship. And I think the FCC is a particularly dangerous place for a partisan who is willing to try to muzzle those with whom she disagrees. Those issues are significant, and there was a time when there were Democrats willing to speak out in defense of free speech. That time seems to have passed, and I think that is unfortunate. I hope that at least some in the Democratic caucus continue to value free speech and don't want to see government power abused, don't want to see in a subsequent Republican administration a Republican on the FCC silencing Democrat voices. That would be equally inappropriate. It's not the role of government to silence voices with which they disagree. And for those of us who've served some time in this body, we've all learned and seen firsthand the shoe is always on the other foot. And one party may have a majority at one point, one party may have the White House at one point, but with the progression of time, the positions are changed. But not only do we have the substantive concerns with Ms. Sohn, we also have concerns, ethical concerns, and concerns about disclosure to this committee. Ms. Sohn went through her entire confirmation hearing without admitting or disclosing the facts of a rather extraordinary settlement that she signed right in the midst of the process of being nominated. Ms. Sohn joined the board of Locast in March of 2020, almost a year after broadcasters sued Locast for massive copyright infringement. And Ms. Sohn knew that Locast was being sued. When she joined the board, she put out a statement supporting Locast at the time the suit was filed. The lawsuit made its way through court on August 31st, 2021. The federal judge ruled against Locast and for the broadcasters. And then on October 28th, 2021, a settlement was filed publicly that stated, quote, plaintiffs, the broadcasters, are awarded statutory damages under the Copyright Act in the amount of $32 million. Now, $32 million is a lot of money. These were the publicly available facts of the Locast agreement, but unbeknownst to the public, a secret settlement agreement had been filed the day before, October 27th, that cut the $32 million down to $700,000, a 98% discount, 2 cents on the dollar. At the exact same time, Ms. Sohn was being vetted and nominated for the FCC. The timing lines up almost perfectly. President Biden announced his intent to nominate her on October 26th. The next day, October 27th, is when the secret settlement was filed. And the day after that is when the White House actually transmitted her nomination. Now, as the chairwoman notes, we had a second hearing for Ms. Sohn on this topic, on the fact that she hadn't disclosed to this committee a secret settlement that raises serious ethical questions. She knew that was the purpose of the hearing. Presumably, she prepared for that hearing. In the course of that hearing, she gave testimony, and in fact, in response to questions from both Senator Thune and from myself about the settlement, Ms. Sohn said that she was, quote, never a party to the litigation, and also, quote, the settlement, first of all, it's important I was not a party to the settlement. So that's what she testified at her second hearing, which she knew was on this topic. Presumably she had prepared for it. Well, in questions for the record that I asked her after the second hearing, I asked about her testimony. Here's what she came back with. I'll read her entire response. I signed the settlement agreement reflecting my voluntary agreement to abide by one paragraph of the settlement agreement, by which I became a party to the settlement. I am not, never was a party to the litigation. To the extent that I said at the hearing I was not a party to the settlement, I misspoke. As a party to the settlement agreement, I was bound by the confidentiality provisions of the agreement. You know, it's an interesting phrasing. To the extent I said at the hearing I was not a party at the settlement. Well, the extent is 100%. And let me read again the quote of what she said. The settlement, first of all, it's important, I was not a party to the settlement. That's exactly what she testified. And even on the second hearing, when she knew there were questions about lack of transparency, she testified falsely before this committee. I think it is a problematic precedent for this committee to move forward a nominee who has serious ethical questions, who has not been candid or transparent with this committee, and even on a subsequent hearing, who testified falsely at that subsequent hearing. And this should be an issue that concerns both Republicans and Democrats, and it should be an issue of ethical standards and transparency that we require of all nominees.